Hey everyone, Kane from VividChim here, and welcome to part 2 of our Cyberpunk discussion, I suppose. Part 1 was the How Bad Can It Be review on the PC version of the game, which you can find by pressing in the eye in the corner. But yeah, this is this is more of a discussion video, similar to the one that we did for the Avengers game when that came out, or the beta for that came out, I should say. We did a discussion on that. And it wasn't scripted, it was more just me giving my thoughts on a number of things. Sorry you might hear a train go by, that's just gonna happen with these videos, I'm afraid. But yeah, that's kind of the vibe we're going for here, a lot more off the cuff, less scripted. You're getting my genuine reactions to the whole situation regarding CD Projekt Red. I've got a few things listed that I'm going to discuss, and yeah, my apologies in advance for language, I should say. Well, when I'm not scripted, I tend to swear, which is something you probably have gotten used to if you watched any Twitch streams or Twitch VODs of mine. But yeah, I wanted to get into this first. Obviously, Cyberpunk's come out. It's been made with controversy. There's been so much, even before its launch, you know, going back to maybe a year ago at this point now. Probably shortly after Keanu Reeves walked out on stage, actually. Not long after that. I think that's when we started to get signs that this was going to be a controversial release regardless of what happened. But obviously, given the past few weeks after it came out, that's a bit of an understatement. And there's been a lot of discussion online about this video game, you know, and we'll get into a lot more of it. But I wanted to start with one of the ones that was actually asked to me in a previous video, and that was discussing the numerous delays of Cyberpunk. For those who perhaps don't know, Cyberpunk was initially meant to launch in April of last year, and then was delayed to, I believe, either August or September, then October, then maybe November and December. It was delayed a few times. Actually, I feel like it was April to September, then November, then a final one to December, when we eventually got the game. And a lot of people have been questioning whether these delays were worth it, because obviously the game came out in a state that a lot of people are very unhappy with. I myself personally love the game on PC, as we discussed in that video. But yeah, it came out in a state that was not good for a lot of reasons, and we will get into that, its post-launch state. But it's caused a lot of people to raise this question, being like, well, they delayed it so many times, and it came out in the state that it did for certain reasons. And was it really worth it? Were the delays worth it? And I feel like this is a bit of a weird discussion that people seem to want to have, even though I don't think there's any discussion to have, you know? To me, like, looking at this, obviously 2020 was a difficult year in regards to working on projects of any kind, be that small-scale one-man projects up to big AAA games such as this, you know. It's a very difficult time period to do stuff, you know. Working from home, having to work through COVID restrictions, obviously that makes things a bit more awkward and almost clunky, I suppose. And this is not me trying to excuse them, but this is just how it is, you know? And to me, I've always had the thing as like, well, the delays were obviously worth it, because if it came out in that state in December, what the hell would we have gotten in April, you know? I think that's the obvious way to look at this, but people don't seem to want to look at it that way, because maybe that's not as aggressively negative for them. A lot of people do want to dislike this game, as is the case with any big game these days. You know, not a AAA release goes by with a myriad of people wanting it to crash and burn, and everyone worked on it suffer for all eternity for some reason. Not sure why, but yeah, that goes for any AAA game, and people tend to be ignoring the fact that what we got could have been a lot worse, and it's hard to imagine in some instances, especially if you're not playing the PC version. It makes me very curious about what we would have got if the management at CD Projekt Red had forced it out when they initially wanted to, and not initially listened to the devs of being like, this game's nowhere near done, which it clearly wasn't anyway. You know, it's not a game that's finished, and whilst it's basically finished on the PC version, you know, it's still missing bits that I think should be there. You know, there's a lot of features that were removed to make up for the time, and it's a whole mess of stuff. And that, it kind of ties in with the second point. Just to wrap it up there, the delays were obviously worth it. You know, delays are always going to be to the benefit of a game. At the end of the day, it's always going to be a matter of working more on this game. And I think that's never really a bad thing. Sure, you can work maybe too much on a game, but in the case of Cyberpunk, at least, I think they were necessary to at least get a functional version of it out there, if not one for everyone, sadly. And I'm not saying that's a good thing, because it should have been functional on all platforms, and they're currently being sued for potential misleading statements, according to them. I can't comment too much on that, obviously. But, yeah, they're currently facing some lawsuits based on that exact fact that the console ports, for example, they came out, they weren't in a good way, you know, they were not finished, they were not in a release state, and they were released and charging, well, 60 to 80 pounds for them, you know what I mean? Depending on the, well, sometimes up in the hundreds, depending on the edition you got. And you didn't even get a game that was playable on some consoles, you know. There's people out there being like the Series X version is playable, and from what I've seen, it's mostly playable, but it's still, you know, it's still not functional at all, and I don't think it should have been released on consoles at all until a later date. And it's such a rabbit hole, and I wish I could go into everything, but quite frankly, this video is already going to be long enough. You know, it's honestly a mess, and whilst I can't comment too much on the lawsuits, you know, you can read all the information that you need to find online about those, and you can come to your own conclusions on it. But to me, at least, when looking at the situation, you know, there's a lot of things that could have been done a lot better with this game, and it all really comes from the top. You know, I feel bad for the devs more than anything. They were crunched when they were promised that they wouldn't be, you know. Adam Badowski came out and said that there was not going to be any crunch for Cyberpunk after The Witcher was a mess, you know. The Witcher was notoriously bad for its crunch, so much so that it actually features in a Jason Schreier's book. I believe it's Blood, Sweat, and Pixels. I believe that's the title of it. Sorry, I don't have it on hand. But yeah, it's a good book going into kind of the development hell of games, and The Witcher 3 is prominently posted in that, and discussing how bad of an experience that was for the CD Projekt Red developers. And I have a feeling Cyberpunk is a very similar situation, as the studio's essentially gone back on their word, forced them to work twice as hard to meet expectations that, in their own words from reports that we've got from inside the studio, you know, these were unattainable expectations that they put on the development team. They said the game was ready when it definitely wasn't, and forced out a game that was just not in a state that should have been sold to consumers. Like, even the PC version, as much as I do love it, I love it more for its narrative than I do its functionality. You know, I could easily, I've got 80 hours in the game, and I can say right now, if I had to wait another 4 months for it, maybe even more, hell, I could have waited another year probably, I would have. Because, to me at least, that's only going to get better, you know? It's going to get more functional, it's going to get more polished time, and I hope they can genuinely redeem this game, because I don't think it's fair to the development team, who's put a lot of work into this, to get screwed over by their higher-ups who just wanted to meet quotas for their investors, who then turned their back on them, you know? It's a disaster, honestly, it really is. And it's honestly extremely disappointing. You know, it's a studio that a lot of people had a lot of praise and good things to say about. And after so long of waiting for this game, so many years of waiting and being excited for this game, you know, CD Projekt Red, the studio, not the people who work for it, you know, they've kind of shot themselves in the foot multiple times and have really killed that reputation that they've spent so long building up as this kind of like a monolith of almost coolness and customer first attitude in gaming that we don't see a lot from companies. You know, a lot of the time when we have reports on companies, it's them being really terrible, and CD Projekt Red was kind of different for a while, and now they've kind of slipped back into the norm, you know, the status quo of being a big game development studio. You crunch your workers, you somehow get away with it because you produce a game that people enjoy, and yeah, that's pretty much the story right now. But one thing I did mention there was how long people have waited, and this goes on to another point which I've seen online, and this one's just straight up wrong in my opinion, because I don't think people really understand how it works. And I'm not saying I'm an expert, but I think this is the wrong attitude to take. It's all these people going out there being like talking about the development time and how a game this bad came out after so many years of being in development. You know, it's 7 years, 6 years, 4 years. You know, I saw one that was upwards of 9 years from Gfinity, which is it honestly, most of it's complete rubbish in my opinion. You know, you're looking at it and it's like, what are you talking about? I'd say the only one that's realistic is maybe 4 years, and I doubt that's even realistic, you know? And a lot of people pointing out that, well, they announced it back in 2012, and they said they had a team working on it back then. It's like, a team working on it doesn't mean that it's in development. And that there's a different thing, and I think people use the term wrong. Yes, it's technically in development, but it's not the development that people think of. You know, they're not sat there, they're not building Night City more than likely. They're doing things like concept art. They're probably doing things like pitching story ideas and just really like the very fundamental stuff, you know. When a dev studio announces a game, it doesn't mean they're working on that game straight away. We've seen this a lot, and I don't know how people don't get it, you know. The Elder Scrolls 6 was announced at E3, for example. The Elder Scrolls 6, we've been waiting on that for, what, 11 years? It probably hasn't been worked on for the last 11 years. Why? Because they've had 2 major releases since it, I believe. They had Fallout 4 and Fallout 76, not to mention some of the other projects that they've been working on the side, you know, some of the other spin-offs, the Fallout and stuff, that they've probably dipped their toes into. And we've got Starfield before that. They announced Starfield and Elder Scrolls and showed nothing of either, which makes me feel like we're not seeing Elder Scrolls for a while. They're just saying, hey, we're doing it, you know? Another example, at the Game Awards this past December, we got a confirmation now they're doing another Mass Effect game. Like, BioWare's working on another Mass Effect game. And people are very excited about that. But you gotta also think about it. Well, they haven't really shown much of Dragon Age, which means they're working on Dragon Age. That's the one in development. It's not really Mass Effect being developed right now. It's basically them saying, hey, this is what we're going to do in the future, you know? And it was the same with Cyberpunk. They were like, look, we're going to work on a game around the Cyberpunk IP. And then we did the teaser for it as a more public display of like, hey, we're doing a Cyberpunk IP down the line. And whilst people were probably working on it, you've got to look at the game CD Projekt Red's been working on in the meantime, which is things like all of the Witcher games that have come out, you know what I mean? There's been a lot of work put into other projects between now and then, so saying it's been in development for 9 years isn't really right, you know, because you gotta look at it the same way that you'd look at a movie, you know? You don't say a movie's in production until it starts shooting. In the same way, we should probably say that a game's in production, or in development, when they've started actually making it, you know what I mean? Instead of what is essentially writing the script. You don't say, hey, this movie's now in production when they're writing the script. You don't do that. You do it on day one of the set where they post their obligatory, hey, we're starting shooting, you know what I mean? It's weird. It's this weird attitude that people have kind of pulled out of thin air to make the situation look a lot worse than it is to get clicks. And I know it works. For the love of God, I've studied journalism for 3 years. You know, I've studied media for a third of my life. You know, I know that this works. I know why they do it, but it's just not the right way to do it. You know, like if we're being honest here, it's probably, I'd say maybe started its proper development maybe after Blood and Wine. I don't know that for sure, but as an educated guess, I'd say that's probably when it actually started getting developed, and games have released since then, so it probably wasn't their major priority until like maybe a couple of years ago, where they started really hammering it home, you know what I mean? And there's definitely something there. They've had something for a while, so it's been in it for a couple of years, And to see what we got with a couple of years is a little disappointing. Don't get me wrong. It's especially on the console versions, it's very disappointing to see to see how like it essentially has fallen apart really after what was a multi-year development contract, especially when we've seen games that work better in less time. Prime examples are, look at Fallout New Vegas. Now, Fallout New Vegas at its launch was a mess, and it still is a mess because it's a Fallout game. But like that game was made in 18 months, and the fact that they got that out in like 18 months is ridiculous, you know? Whereas this one, say for example, if it was 3 or 4 years, or maybe slightly more, you know, it's a bit ridiculous, quite frankly. But yeah, to me, and this is kind of more of just a ramble at this point than a rant at people kind of taking the wrong approach of it. This really could have been a Your Opinion is Wrong video, but yeah, to me, I don't think it's excusable what they've done. I've been quite open about how I'm very angry at CD Projekt Red for the most part. I don't think it's as bad as a lot of people are saying in some regards. I think the console ports are absolutely atrocious. I don't think the game should have been released. I'm very mad at the game, at the studio even, for pushing out a game that was essentially not ready to be released, charging people money for it and scamming them, in my opinion. I don't think that was a very cool thing of them to do. And I think it was even less cool when they essentially tried to shift the blame, so much so that they got removed from the PlayStation Store, you know what I mean? They angered a lot of people, and they've damaged their reputation as a studio, and the sad thing about it is they've probably damaged their devs' reputations even more, which is a crying shame, because the people who worked on this game all seem genuinely lovely for a start, and more importantly than that, like, when you look at it, and what they've done, like, it's there, you know, there is a good game there. In fact, there is a fantastic game there. And I reckon as it gets, like, more and more fixed as time goes on, I reckon it's going to be recognized as such. But, yeah, it pisses me off to see a studio have such a blatant disregard for not only the consumer, but the people that work there, you know? And there's going to be so many people who, like, love this game, and they're gonna defend this game. You shouldn't defend this company, you know? You should be honest about it. Like, you should call out stuff being like, look, it's probably not this, you know? It's probably not a 9-year development time. The delays were worth it, because it could have been a lot worse. But you should also not, like, this isn't a hill to die on, you know? You shouldn't be like, I'm here to defend CD Projekt Red because I believe in everything they do. No, they've done some terrible things as a company. They've done some real scummy things as a company. And they should be called out for what it is. And what it is bullshit, in my opinion. You know? And they've done a real botched job of what could have been a generation-defining game. You know, this could have been the game to define the next generation of video game consoles and just everything in general, and what we got instead out of it was CD Projekt Red falling in line with the same bullshit corporate tactics that defined the previous generation, via things like EA, via things like Epic, or the whole Apple situation, you know, or... It's just sad, more than anything. It really is, because this game, it could have been something, and there is something there, but it's time we really stop trying to, like, meet these expectations of consumers. You know, these consumers are frothing at the mouth, being like, we need this game. And you've got the corporate side of it, which is like, well, these people want this game, we're going to give them this game, and we're going to make money off of them, you know? And there's a disconnect in between where they don't really think of the actual product that they're delivering them, as long as they are delivering it to them, you know? Cyberpunk's an incredibly profitable game. I actually want to talk, like, let's Google this right now. I actually want to have a look at this. Most of my search history is stuff for the Cyberpunk video that we did. Let's have a look. What would it be? I'll probably cut some of this out. Okay, it exceeded its development costs real quickly. Sorry about that. But yeah, man, it's crazy. You know, it was pre-ordered 8 million times, and it was digital copies of the game for like so many of them. It's crazy. It really is crazy, and it's just annoying to see a studio that was much beloved by many. Now, I don't personally have a connection with them because I don't really care about The Witcher that much. I haven't played it. I need to play it at some point, but, you know, I like the books, I like the Netflix series, I've never really played the games. And that's just the truth. that is the truth on the matter. You know, my relationship with CD Projekt Red ends at I played Cyberpunk. Oh, and wait, actually, no, tell a lie, I played Saints Row 2. There we go. That's another one that I played. Yeah. Honestly, though, it's just a mess. I know I kind of went off the rails just talking about it. There's other things as well that I wanted to talk about. You know, whilst not CD Projekt Red, CD Projekt owned GOG. They had the whole Red Candle Games fiasco about Devotion. Literally, like maybe a week after Cyberpunk released and all that stuff, they made it worse on themselves somehow. Because they announced that, well, Red Candle Games made a tweet saying that they were going to put Devotion, their game that was removed from Steam a couple of years back, that was going to go on GOG. And if you don't know the story of that, the best way to describe it is it's a horror game made by the same people that made the game Detention, which is I believe they're a Taiwanese studio, I believe. And yeah, it's a game called Devotion. You can probably find some Let's Plays on YouTube. I sadly don't own it because I can't buy it. But yeah, it was removed because they found something in the files which was a meme of sorts that was comparing the Chinese president, which is Xi Jinping, I believe. I'm not the best at pronouncing Chinese names, I'm sorry. But yeah, they essentially found a meme comparing him to Winnie the Pooh, which, yeah, it got a lot of people angry, and Steam eventually had to pull the game. I believe it was actually Red Candle who pulled the game from Steam themselves, after kind of being attacked about the meme, and it's not really been seen since, and a lot of people were very excited, and they made such a bullshit statement about it. You know, they come out and said, oh, we've had messages from gamers, so we're not going to put it up on the platform, which is a complete lie, because if you looked at the original post, when they announced it was coming to GOG, all it was hype about it. There was hype generating around it. People were very excited to play this game, because it genuinely looks fantastic, and they couldn't, because CD Projekt did a controversial move in the eyes of a lot of Western gaming audiences and kind of bowed down to the extreme Chinese market. And I don't really blame them for doing so because of the amount of money that's involved with that. You know, the Chinese market is huge, and they don't really want to anger that because it's just not a good business move, so I completely understand why they did it. It's just kind of sad to see at the cost of a game that a lot of people were very excited to play, which, you know, they seem to be accustomed to botching the releases of games that people are very excited to play. But there we are. There was another thing I want to discuss as well briefly. There was two controversies about the game before it came out. There was the one about the animals and the kind of alleged racism in the game. I'm not really going to discuss that one here, simply because that one doesn't have a leg to stand on, in my opinion. It's just clickbait. The entire argument was essentially based on the fact that you could kill a black person who was part of the Animals gang in the game, and they were just labeled as Animal, and they thought that was not cool, despite there being multiple white people also named Animal, and people of different origins also named Animal. It was just a gang name. So that one was just making something out of nothing to get clicks, and I think that one backfired. The other one that I do want to discuss was the Transgender Poster. And for those who don't know, there's a ad in the game for a drink, I believe it's called. It says "Mix It Up," and the person holding the drink is a transgender model. And there was a lot of controversy around this. I don't know all of the history of it myself. There was a lot of stuff about CD Projekt Red as a company before Cyberpunk. I don't know that stuff. Like I said, I've not really looked into it too much because this is my real first experience with them as a studio. But yeah, there was a lot of controversy about it, and the artist essentially came out and said, no, this is kind of the point. It's supposed to be It's supposed to be over the top, and it's supposed to be kind of offensive, which is not a good way of saying it, I suppose, but the idea of it is, in this world where gender isn't really a thing due to the ability to cybernetically augment yourself, gender kind of stops becoming a thing, really, after a certain time. And it's like, it's still a thing, but not at the extent of some other, you know, you can be who you want to be, and that's just how the world is, really, and you're kind of just accepted for it at the end of the day. But yeah, it's looking at that, and then it's saying, well, if we lived in a world where that was accepted, you know for a fact companies would exploit it, you know? Companies would exploit it and then use that and sort of fetishize it to sell products, which is exactly what it's doing in the game, you know? That's the point of that. I've literally written essays on the sexualization of women in adverts at, like, GCSE level. That was something that I, like, studied back in GCSE when I was doing media. Was I wrote essays on that kind of stuff because I've always thought it was interesting the way people were represented in media. So to me, when I saw it, I was like, oh, that's a pretty on the nose comment. You know, I also did sociology, which covers a lot of the same ground. You know, so I guess I was kind of familiar to that idea and kind of just saw what they were doing with it. And it was like, okay, that makes sense. As a person who knows the cyberpunk world and just the real world and how things like marketing works, I kind of saw it and I was like, oh, okay, that's quite clever. And then I kind of moved on. But at the same time, you know, it's not really something that would bother a person like me. So I get why people were bothered by it. But, you know, I think there was a good reason for them to include it. And I think it's a nice little commentary, even if it is one that's not directly brought up and is just kind of there as a part of the scenery. But yeah, overall, just wanted to wrap this up because we've been going for a little while here. Just wanted to say that I'm personally very disappointed by this game's launch. The game itself, naturally, I'm playing on PC, so I'm not exactly disappointed with the game, but I have got basically the only functional version of the game, and I've said it numerous times when streaming it or on Twitter that I'm bitterly disappointed with CD Projekt Red and the way they've handled this entire thing. It's made me angry at points, you know, as a person who believes that the consumer should get what they're being presented with, you know. I think it's kind of bullshit. They were promised a game and shown a game and then delivered something that did not meet those expectations at all or even close, and were essentially just kind of scammed out of their money and made the executives at CD Projekt Red a profit, who then turned on them when it backfired incredibly. So it's kind of just imploding at the moment. I'm very curious to see where it goes. Hopefully they fix the game and they get it working for people on consoles and on the next gen systems when those eventually come out, because, you know, this is a game that I recommend you watch the review to get a deeper understanding of my thoughts on the game itself. But you know, it's a game I think people should experience. I think it was very helpful to me in 2020 based on my year. That was 2020. But yeah, man, I just wish people could get the game that they wanted and that they paid for. And sadly, even if the game didn't live up to the hype for them, even if it was functional, you know, they don't even get to have that opportunity because, well, it's not functional enough to even let you down, you know. And that's the problem at the end of the day. Is like, why is this allowed on the stores? And I think, hopefully, in my opinion, going forward, it might change the way console games are looked at before they're released. I doubt it, because money needs to be made at the end of the day. But hopefully this could be like a Battlefront 2 situation where it changes the perspective on certain things within the industry. In that case, it was loot boxes. In this one, maybe it's how we release games going forward, you know? But yeah, anyway, sorry for this long-ass video, but I wanted to do just an off-the-cuff discussion. I feel like doing it as a scripted one wouldn't be genuine enough. I don't know. I like doing my scripted content a lot. I think it's quite fun. But you know, with a discussion like this and with one that's so deep, I think it was a lot better for me to just kind of talk to you guys and be honest. Sorry there was no face cam, just because I didn't really have time to set it up. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the footage in the background, some of the random cyberpunk music as well. And I'll see you next time. Goodbye, everyone.